Just
What's what they always do, like on the debates and all that? You know, somebody be talking. Oh.
yeah.
Write it down,
Yeah, we'll write something down. I'm never going to do that
I
later.
don't know. You look more like those guys that follow Kim Jong-un around, you know, and write down everything he says.
Just try to not die.
Right.
And we're live with Rackspace Office Hours, live from Rackspace, the #1 managed cloud company. I'm Alan Bush, and we're broadcasting live from our castle here in San Antonio. I've got two guys in the studio with me that I'm super excited to be joining us. I've got Kent Kingery here on my left, and I've got Jeff DeVerter here on my right. They are two of our experts in Microsoft. They're two of our mini experts in Microsoft.
There you go. There's more than two here.
There are several more than two here, but you two are the most fun.
I brought a pen.
Yeah, he brought a pen.
It says Microsoft.
There are notes on his notebook. Kent is brimming with notes. He doesn't need a notebook, so he's good to go. He's good to go. So we're here. We're just going to talk about the year that was from Microsoft. Before we get started, yeah, it was a heck of a year. Before we get started, let's introduce our co-host Drew Cox, joining us from his home studio.
Hello. How's everyone?
Studio. Do you see those guitars?
Yeah, it's literally a studio. There are at least 3 guitars that I can see on the.
And my son's ukulele.
Oh, there you go. So yeah, you've got it covered there. Drew's going to be joining us. If you are watching us live on Periscope or on Facebook, and you want to see Drew and see everything else, head over to ohpodcast.com, and we're broadcasting live from there as well. But if you are watching us live and you have a question that you want to share with us, feel free to drop us a line. Comment on any of those platforms that we've mentioned before, and we would love to answer them.
Or at least make an answer up.
Yeah, we'll absolutely make an answer up. That is not a problem.
I've got 9 right here in my pocket.
There will not be dead air.
Randomly pull them out.
Nice. There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, let's get started. I am not the expert for Microsoft. That's why we got you guys on. We want to have people that are smarter than us on the show to make sure that we can get these things answered. So,
but they couldn't find anybody, so they reached out to us. Exactly.
Todd Clint was busy in Iowa.
Oh,
so,
there we
We're
go.
going to play Stump the Jump later.
Yeah.
Well, okay. We'll play Stump the Chump later.
Yeah.
If we can
and
find
Todd will
Todd.
make you a chicken. So,
Chicken joke lives.
it does. It's never going to die. It's
I love
never going to
that.
die. So,
What
guys,
if he's watching? What if he'll send us a
I hope
question?
he is. I hope he's watching.
Maybe
So,
he'll say something mean.
I'm sure he will. No, so tell us, what happened this year with
Well,
Microsoft?
it's been a big year. Let's look at things from a larger perspective. Did you ever think you'd see a year of devices like this coming out of Microsoft?
No.
Let's start with the cool, fun stuff. And it's not this one. That's the Apple flavor.
That's a different phone.
So we talk about it from a device perspective, but it really goes in all areas. It's a new Microsoft.
Oh.
Yeah.
What are some things that Kent on your side that I already said devices for
You've
me,
already
so-
said devices, so I just want to dive right to the device. I am actually starting a GoFundMe to get me a Surface Studio.
Can you do it
I
by
just
name so
I
we
went
can
by
get- I
the
can
by
get
the
one too?
place in the mall, right? The little
Yeah.
kiosk,
Yeah.
and the girl is showing it to me and laying it all out and everything. And I touched it, and I was like, I felt my wallet crawling out of its pocket. You know, good thing they don't sell them right there. I would have had one.
Yeah.
So
The design, the elements that they're looking at, really nothing is sacred other than things done well.
correct.
So they're throwing everything under the bus. You know, it was I really did my best to carry the Windows Phone for as long as I could. But I was
too.
at a conference a year and a half ago. Maybe it was earlier this year. No, it was in March. And they did these great demos on stuff that was coming new, bots inside of Skype. And I thought, whoa, wicked cool. I'm going by the Skype desk and see what's going on there. And they said, yeah, and try it out on your mobile as well. You know, we're on Android and Apple. And I said, what about my Windows Phone? And she said, sorry, no. And when Microsoft wasn't even writing for the platform, I thought,
Yeah, that's a good indicator.
But that's interesting, right? So you talk about it being a new Microsoft. It's been a new Microsoft for a while, but man, this year is just ramped up like crazy. So sitting in a couple of these conferences, right, and seeing the development tools and the ecosystem support and all of the various things that they're doing for Android and iPhone. I mean, man, it's impressive, and it's impressive that they have, again, as you said, nothing is sacred. I mean, because the old Microsoft, let's be frank, the old Microsoft would have kept that stuff, away with guard, gates and
Right.
machine
Throw a chair
guns
at you
and
if you brought it out.
absolutely.
That was a Steve Ballmer joke.
Yeah, I know.
He didn't though.
Is this where I'm doing my developers, and run around the studio?
So you've been to actually a couple of interesting conferences. One of the last ones was when you were up with a bunch of architects looking at some things inside of Azure. So we've talked about devices. You can go look at surface.com and see how cool they are. But the reality is what we're excited about and doing a lot with right now is helping with Microsoft Azure.
Right.
And so you were at an Azure, I'll call it an airlift environment. And so, talk about some of the stuff you saw there. But
sure.
I'll preface that by also saying, 6 months before that, when Microsoft stands on stage with the sign that's the bigger than life that says, Microsoft loves Linux. There was about 50 of us sprinkling rock salt down where hell froze over.
Absolutely. Looking to buy snow cones down in the nether regions, right?
That's right.
Absolutely.
So what are some of the things that stick out there? Because really, we see cool devices, but what they're doing from a cloud perspective.
It's crazy. So I'll tell you three things that really quickly came to my mind. First is the enormous amount of resource that Microsoft is investing in data centers. So they showed a couple of these data centers that they're building now that is using airflow to cool the building, right? I mean, it's not even traditional air conditioning. They literally open the windows and let the air flow.
And they're doing that here in San Antonio, where in the summer it's 100.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? And the way that they handle that humidity, and all of that is just amazing. And one of the things that the VP in charge said is every time we think about data center building and security and those sorts of things, Microsoft spends more in one data center than most of the Fortune 50s kind of joined together do.
Yeah.
So that's great. And to see them continue to move that around. The second thing is the amazing amount of resources that they are making available to the developer community. Now Microsoft has always been the developer company. I mean, I remember, years ago getting into it and getting this 10-yard box of, like books and stuff, in order to program Windows. But just look at the stuff. Every other speaker at this conference said, oh, by the way, and that's the source code of that is on GitHub.
The source code is on GitHub.
That to me is the most amazing thing, is that there's so much of it that's out there for the open source community. Our good friend, we mentioned him last time you were on, Don Shank, is writing .NET for Linux and literally writing the book on it. And so, it's all over the place. And it's just, this is a crazy time to be alive.
Well, and that was the third thing I was going to point out is that no, it's okay. It's amazing that you end up with now being able to deploy your applications on any major platform, right? Ubuntu, whether it's Red Hat, whether it's Windows, whatever. And the fact that they are thinking through this far enough in advance to say code unchanged, pick up and drop on there with the whole .NET Core piece is actually mind blowing. So,
even the SQL Sacred Cow on Linux.
Oh yeah,
it's
Well, Visual Studio on the Mac. I mean, come on, right? What world are we in here?
It's just,
well, you've talked about all of the changes, all of the growth. Hey, voice from above. You're talking about all of these new features and all this new gear, and then you're talking about interoperability between things that would have otherwise been completely unheard of not that long ago. But the interoperability, even within all of these things that are being provided by all of these new features and all this new hardware, with these data centers is really, really exciting. You can interoperate between all numbers of different tools, and that means that you've got a lot more value at the fingertips of the consumer. And so that is really exciting. To see all of the new stuff showing up is fun, but then to see that so much of it works so well together with itself and with the things you're already doing elsewhere really opens up opportunities far beyond what people would have normally expected out of a Microsoft of not many years ago at all.
It's almost like they're playing to win.
Yeah,
one would think.
Well, I think they figured out the walled garden thing doesn't work. It doesn't work outside their company, and it certainly doesn't work inside their company either.
No. It's I was thinking about what you were saying there about all this stuff sort of working together with unlikely bedfellows in some cases. So one of the, I think, is a really cool bit of technology that's part of Azure is a thing called Azure Site Recovery. So Azure Site Recovery is you can use as a migration tool. It's a replication tool where I can take a VM running kind of anywhere, running in Hyper-V, running a dedicated server, running in VMware, and I can replicate that out into Azure. And the greedy Microsoft of the past, and I don't mind calling them the greedy Microsoft of the past, would have started the meter running on that replication bit, on second one. There are 30 days of free use of that stuff inside of Azure. And what that amounts to then is this replication tool is turned into an amazing migration tool, because now I can migrate for free. But wait, what if I don't want to go to Azure? I can actually use it to bounce from a platform into Azure and then back to another platform.
Right.
No cost.
Right.
No cost. 30 days. I can use it for 30 days.
And frankly, what medium-sized business or even a larger business can't do their migration in 30 days? I mean, almost all of them can,
Right.
of any size.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and there's plenty of service providers to help them make that migration as well.
You bet.
they're
But
out
then
there.
you take it to the next step, and I could be migrating, replicating out of AWS into Azure for that backup. Truly, because we think a lot of customers, we at Rackspace, a lot of folks will ask, "Hey, what about multi-cloud? You do multi-cloud?" And we say, "Well, we see people building solutions in one or the other. It's really a department or company's choice of where they're going to put their expertise." Where we see, I think, some significant opportunity, initial opportunity from a multi-cloud perspective, is using one cloud as a redundant platform for the other. And Azure Stack, wrong one. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But ASR, Azure Site Recovery, is one of the tools that makes that happen. All right. So we've covered devices.
We have.
By the way, there's some really cool rumors for next year for the Surface Phone.
Well, let's hang on to that for our what's going to happen next year
All right, well,
portion of the
let's
show.
not get that. We're not even at
That's
2016.
That's what we call a teaser, right?
Yeah.
We're still in the middle of 2016 here. I do want to take this minute to thank everybody that's watching us live. MJ on Facebook says, "I really like Rackspace support." Well, yeah, we do too. So definitely thank you for that. Thank you for that little bit of support there. Really appreciate that. And anybody else is watching, let us know. We'd love to try to answer some questions for you here live on the air.
Or just say your name.
Yeah. Just pop in and say hi, and we'll thank you for watching. So, let's see who else is watching here. Let's see, Roger and Michael and Gutierrez, SA. It looks like we've got a couple of people that are already joining in. So, thanks everybody for
Welcome.
that. Yeah, and let's get back into it. So we've already talked about devices and developers and the frozen nature of hell right now with with Bash on Windows,
Bash on Windows,
and Linux support for .NET and everything. So
well, it's even a whole mindset. You talk about Bash. Bash is really cool because a lot of folks know how to use that already and get useful data out of it or use it as a tool. But then also they've also announced that in the upcoming update is the standard command prompt goes away in lieu of PowerShell. So now the world is really viewed through a scripted perspective, scripted glasses.
Thank you, Jeffrey Snover. Right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. Because I wanted that. I mean, the command prompt's been anemic. It's been anemic forever. It's like Notepad.
Right.
It's just been around and we kind of use it. But
That's a good
man,
point.
PowerShell, the other day I was in it, and it's just amazing, just the simple functionality.
Yeah.
well, and they're doing a lot of things right on PowerShell. I mean, you see just the way that everything expands, and you can see all of the commands that are at your disposal there as it expands, and it's just a ton of a beautiful way to go through the power or through that shell, and then adding in additional functionality through outside parties and stuff like that. It's huge, and it's really going to help people develop.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm starting to see articles about people who are writing their own commandlets that are industry specific or company specific, right? So they can hand them off to people and be able to do things in the shell, right? That are specific to their company. So,
well, and it takes us from Rackspace has cut our teeth being system administrators, system operators, system managers, and traditionally the way that we've done that is right click, properties, change a thing, make it better, see an alarm, respond to that alarm, try to make sure that alarm doesn't go off again. And that's been great value for our customers. We built an entire business on being able to do that. But the reality is in a hyperscale cloud world, we need to think very differently in that. And that really is where it comes down to is give me scripts, give me commandlets, give me things that I can execute where I'm not necessarily going into a full GUI to do whatever I need to do. Because once we're able to do that, then we can take some machine learning, another topic to get into in a minute, and have some run books that now predictively are going to go through and make changes to environments before problems occur, before we're overrun with requests, before we have a ton of infrastructure running that we don't need running to serve the current demand.
Yeah, automation is one of those conversations that really helps to extend the value of your existing employees. The more you can build tools that take care of those things without someone having to go in and touch the machine themselves, the more they can focus on things that are going to bring new features to bear for your company and things along those lines, which is only going to build the value of what you're already doing as a business. So it's huge to be able to throw automation at some of these projects and some of these products through tools like the command line.
Well, I think customers are demanding it of us as well, because the tech industry is not immune or is not an island to this situation. If you walk into a car manufacturing plant today, it looks entirely different than it did 20 years ago. And our data centers need to look different. And the way that we're managing these applications and the way that they're built needs to be in kind of what's happened in the auto industry.
Well, and I think Microsoft has kind of taken this idea of the citizen developer, right, even further, right? So now you've got people that normally would not be software developers, but that are able to use PowerShell and able to use scripting and templates in the case of Azure or whatever, and be able to really put together some very powerful capabilities. And I think that Drew hit the nail on the head too about freeing people up to go innovate. A lot of times what I find is that people in the IT department of a company understand the business model as well or sometimes better than people who are actually in the business themselves, because they understand the inner workings of it, right? So
that's a great point. That's a great point. Plenty of changes, and I do. It's interesting. We already mentioned the data centers that Microsoft is building, but I mean, our entire world of industry is changing, and so basically every industry you look at, there's going to be some major change happening, and so it'll be interesting to see, what happens next.
Well, Ken, you and I had lunch yesterday, and we were talking about, from a value perspective, we have to up level. We have to continue to go to those higher order activities to provide value. And I think it's something that I've seen Microsoft do extraordinarily well. They didn't, go out and build some great data centers and then sit back and say, come to our data centers. We got IaaS, enjoy. No, they built PaaS. And then after they built PaaS on top of PaaS and PaaS on top of PaaS on top of PaaS, because you have these capabilities and things that they're doing, even from in their security center, with what they're doing around predictive information around what's going on inside of your Azure environment, or even over on your 365 environment, because all that's running in the same space. And having the ability to use predictive learning, to use analysis, to use big data, and to a very strong degree IoT, to provide some very real actionable steps for people to be able to have to action on, as opposed to have to weed through a million lines of something. Now they have 2 or 3 things that they can make a decision on if it's really an issue.
Well, and how to handle the very, very complex things with Microsoft technology. Because let's be honest, I mean, a few years ago, if you really wanted to get into complicated data management, complicated data handling, data analysis, big data, that sort of thing, there really was not a Microsoft story. Right. And now there is. Not only is there a story around a Microsoft product like HD Insight, for example, in Azure, but there's also the story around Microsoft's view of what that analytics process looks like, coupled with the machine learning, et cetera.
So while Kent and I tend to be very strong Microsoft evangelists, we're also not Microsoft apologists, meaning they didn't get everything right. And they're still, you've got this aircraft carrier that is turning, and we're seeing some very significant positive changes, but there's still some stuff that is just baggage that you have to deal with.
I would love to hear what that is.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Segway. I'll tell you. So one of those things that we struggle with, and that you guys are undoubtedly dealing with, is how do you actually buy some of this stuff? Microsoft has spent a ton of time building an amazing sales force, and now they're changing their sales model. They're going away from enterprise agreements to a degree. They're getting away from the shrink wrap model of stuff. Right. This once every 3 years, I'm going to show up and take an order from you or negotiate an order, to a consumption-based model. Yeah. Ken, we fight this every day.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to turn SQL Server on. In the traditional world, I'm going to go buy SQL Server for $10,000 and go buy a server to put it on. Today, this afternoon, I'm going to run a script. I'm going to bring SQL Server up. I'm going to put my data on. I'm going to run it for 5 days. I'm going to turn it off. And then I'm going to get a bill for those 5 days of the usage of SQL Server.
Down to the minute.
Right? It's by the drink, right? I mean, that's what we want. And it's what we've wanted for a long time, and just never had a real easy way to consume it. But I do agree with you that it could be easier to consume. It could be easier to understand. I mean, that is, and I think that just is the natural lag of the business side of it behind the technology.
Is that a flaw of their licensing model versus, say, open source on the Linux and other side?
I don't think so. I think what it is just we're midstream in a change of how you actually license stuff. And that's just hard when you have 50,000 people out there who are comped on a sale.
Yeah.
And you also have another group of folks who are comped on consumption. That's at odds.
I was about to say, 50,000 people comped on one type of sale, 50,000 people comped on another type of sale that really do not marry up together.
No, they don't. So, they are at odds. They're working on it. They're getting it's better this year than it was last year, but it still hurts. And if you're somebody trying to buy from Microsoft, sometimes it's not overly easy. And when you buy into one thing, it tends to not be super easy to move to the next thing.
Correct.
Well, what does that mean in relation to our offerings and our ability to have that close relationship with Microsoft, understand a lot of their portfolio, and be able to leverage all of those different components and that shifting model towards customers that we have that may already want to consume that model, as well as customers who may want to get the most value out of that shift inflection that Microsoft is going through?
Ooh, that's a good question. It's hard because our sales folks, our customer relationship folks, they have to be able to express the value of both sides. Ultimately, it's the customer who's going to get to make that choice. We are, to a degree, incented one direction. The Microsoft field can tend to be incented another direction. We're all trying to do the same thing. We're trying to get workloads running inside of Microsoft platforms that make sense to be in those platforms. And it's a little easier for us at Rackspace because we support a ton of stuff, not only all this Microsoft business, but we got a thriving AWS business. We have a thriving historical dedicated offering. We have our own cloud. So as long as it's Rackspace providing what we do best, and that is support, that's ultimately what we're selling. Unfortunately, it's the customer who gets kind of caught in the cogs, and as they're trying to figure out what is the best way to consume those licenses for their business.
Well, and as with any company of any size like Microsoft, depending on who the customer talks to this week versus who they talk to next week, they might get a little bit different picture, just dependent on the bias and the background of the Microsoft employee. And that's not a bad thing. It's just what happens, right? I mean, people get in their areas of comfort. They know what they know. That's one of the areas I think we help quite a bit is we have a broader picture. We have experience around all of the different kinds of platforms, and we can actually point out and say, hey, maybe not that, maybe this thing instead.
Right.
That's where our sales process gets to include SEs with a really broad portfolio they get to work with. So those sales engineers have backgrounds that extend far enough that a solution that may be novel to the customer now all of a sudden becomes surfaced by that sales engineer who's got that broad portfolio to work from.
Very true. And it puts us in a really interesting position as well, because we're now, in I'll call it the old days of dedicated hosting, those sales engineers could architect a solution that was good for 3 to 5 years. We may throw a little extra memory or disk at the thing, but it just kind of works because there wasn't all that much innovation happening at the VM level or at the hypervisor layer. But now, from a cloud perspective, when you've got, you may architect a solution that's got a bunch of infrastructure as a service to provide a service for your application, and next week Microsoft may deploy, or even AWS may deliver a service that does that as a service. And so we have to be extraordinarily flexible with our customers, and we've tried to do that with our support models and our sales models as well, so that they can throw bits away if it doesn't make sense for them to use that anymore, and not be penalized on our side because they've signed some sort of a contract, but for us to be able to be part of that architectural relationship going forward. And that's as we go back to the whole, what is Microsoft a year in review? There's been a ton of things added to Azure that we've even seen provide this sort of thing. So the security offering that I mentioned earlier, that has really come into its own this year, providing capabilities in and around Azure as well as over in for 365. 365. Why would you need security for 365? One asked Kent. What do you think?
I need security for 365 because 365 is where I'm creating a lot of the content that's germane to my business.
Right.
I have a lot of business knowledge and a lot of business information locked up inside. But inside Office 365. So security to me is of paramount importance, right? And then that's why I think that the overlay across all of their offerings of Security Center is huge.
Yeah. So, we think about how do we keep that data secure, but then also, we've done talks on this, we've done webinars on this, and that is the first thing that has to happen in the 365 space for a company to enable that is you've got to get your Active Directory stuff moved over. Once we've done that, we can throw Security Center to pay attention to that. So that when Alan's logging in, when I see Alan log in from San Antonio and Singapore 5 minutes apart, that may light up a little something in Security Center.
I'm a jet setter, but that's ridiculous.
That's impressive.
Just ridiculous.
The HoloLens can only do so much.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, and that's why the managed identity offering, right, that we've kind of sort of built on the back of the Microsoft technology makes a lot of sense. We can get a customer who's got this old crusty Active Directory kind of scenario, bring that into the fold, and then they're able to take advantage of all of this new technology and capability that we get in Security Center.
That's right. So I got to ask the question, because you sort of segued it there a little bit. As the cloud does more, as Rackspace does more to help folks in the cloud, do they lose their jobs?
Oh, I don't think so.
Change their jobs.
I was going to
change their
say
scope probably.
And so this is the comment that I made earlier about the IT, personnel sometimes knowing the business better than the business does. And so the idea is to free them up to innovate, to be able to think more about it, right? We've always talked about this, right? I spend 90% of my time patching and wiring and installing and turning screws and racks, 10% of my time thinking about the strategic value of IT. Let's flip that.
Well, we talked about this a lot, and I think Drew's got a pretty good take on this. But when we were talking with some folks with New Relic, with a lot of their data analysis that they were doing, and how that was freeing people up. Drew, do you remember what I'm talking about here?
Vaguely. We have a lot of conversations with those guys. So
you from under the bus there, Drew. No, it's what I remember. What I remember was we were talking about being able to look at a larger picture, right? And when you have all that data available to you, and you're not spending all of your time tracking that data and storing that data and worrying about where it is, you're able to actually take a look at it, and you can take more requests from the different folks in the that are the stakeholders in the business, and understand, put people together and say, hey, I have this bit of data from this group, and I have this bit of data from this group, and we put them all together. I have more time to actually look at the data as opposed to just tending the data and cultivating it the whole time.
All the way back to the dark ages of my college career when I first learned the difference between data and information, right? We can connect the data and store the data and, millions and millions and millions and trillions of rows of data, but without some analysis and some use of it as information, I mean, what's the point?
That's a great, great differentiation there.
Well, I think you're referring, Alan, to a conversation we had with Robert Chapa, where he's sitting above these certain workflows, and he's able to say, okay, this silo is working on this, and this silo is working on this, but the change in the middle is really where one of the problems happens. Let's create data around, or let's capture data around that, and then mold that into something usable and informative, and that's a really useful position to be able to take above a couple of different pieces where you can connect the dots. But one of the things that I think would be really valuable for companies to do in the early part of next year is to do sort of a time study and say, where are my people spending their time actually, and how much value is that bringing us versus how much maintenance are they doing, and where can we find places to offload that work from them so that we can shift the ratio towards value-added work. And that's something that we're seeing a lot of focus on broadly in the community, but without the data of a time study that says, what are we actually paying our people to do? What are they using their time for? It can get lost on where the real value holes are in your current solution. And there's a lot of opportunity to recapture some of that time and drive it into things that are going to be useful for the business.
Well, think all the way back to the days of Dan Bricklin and VisiCalc, right? One of the very first spreadsheets. And before we had spreadsheets, we had a whole raft, an army of people that were doing things on ledgers and keeping things like that and doing that information. And all of a sudden, we came up with a way to very quickly put numbers in, change them around, be very fluid about our analysis. And now you have a whole nother level of people that are making better business decisions. And I think that just analogous to the spreadsheet is the idea of big data, machine learning, et cetera. We're going to be able to enable the business user to make better decisions and more informed decisions, just in the same way we did it with a spreadsheet.
Sounds like a lot.
And you're sharing. You're able to share that data really quickly and easily. A physical ledger is something that has to be walked over to another person and viewed. Once you go to spreadsheets, that can be passed around a little bit easier. But once you get into big data and some of the visualization tools, there can be a giant data lake, and people have the tools to say, well, I wonder, and click around a bit and come to conclusions that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. It would have had to have been asked specifically, handed off to a data scientist team to go put together a report on this and get back to me next quarter, and we'll start to make decisions, instead of clicking around a bit and having actionable reports to work from in nearly real time, which is a really, really exciting reality for those business users to be able to shape the business and become more responsive and be able to deliver value to their customers more quickly, and do A/B testing that's going to really turn over the best way to move forward for their organization.
The ability to play what if is one of the single biggest benefits, I think, of our ability to pull data together in a way that can be analyzed, can be reviewed, can be looked at. I mean, that draws us, if we're going to go back, we're talking sort of at a broader scale from a technology perspective. Let's pull it back to Microsoft. That's where we get into Power BI. I've watched the lights turn on some of our architects who are just so used to, I'm going to run a script now. Because it's how we've always done things. I almost knocked that over. I was pretending I was typing. And they got a hold of Power BI with some of the outputs of their data. And they said, hey, but wait a minute, look at the thing. We never saw the thing. Now you can see the anomalies. Now you can see the trends where you couldn't see them before, because graphically put up there with just a couple of clicks and a drag away, and you've got it.
Well, the comment about the data scientist, right, is an interesting one, because not only can you see the data, but you can also start to see places where your data quality is not as good as it should be.
Yeah.
And so your data people can now start to focus on the quality of the data, not just as how to visualize it and how to move it around and how to store it. That's the key piece.
Because nobody wants to sit in front of the CEO and he goes, those lines don't add up the way they're supposed to.
No, no, you don't. No, you don't. All right, so we've talked quite a bit about about Microsoft thus far, but let's keep digging in a little bit more. I do want to take a minute just to thank everybody that's watching us live right now. Looks like Dom has checked in, and Dawn and Mike and Vijay and Mercedes and several others are joining us as well, and some others on Twitter and Periscope and YouTube that we don't have their names for yet. But hey, everybody, thanks for watching. This is Rackspace, the #1 managed cloud company. I'm Alan Bush, and I'm here with Jeff DeVerter and Kent Kingery. We're talking about Microsoft and what's happened this year with Microsoft. We've been longtime partners with Microsoft, going back almost the entire existence of our company. We're 5-time hosting partner of the year. Yep. And we've got a very rich history. And I've got two of many experts that we have here at Rackspace. And we're here talking about that. So if you have a question, let us know. We'd be happy to try to answer it here on the air, or if you're watching later in the future. I hope the future is looking good for you, and we'd be happy to answer. You can just tweet at any of us or send us an email, and we'd be happy to help you out there.
Awesome. So we've sort of thrown some rocks a little bit at the Microsoft Salesforce and the change in consumption capabilities. But, with a company that's as old as Microsoft, they've got a pretty rich, ecosystem. And there were a couple of conferences that we participated in this past year that were pretty amazing to get to see. So the first one was up in Toronto, and that was at the Worldwide Partner Conference, WPC. 20,000 partners. You imagine an ecosystem of people worldwide who travel to one place, Toronto, pretty city. Nice weather compared to San Antonio in September or in July. Yeah. But it's a pretty amazing ecosystem. Kent, you've worked in that ecosystem. I have to a degree. How have you seen changes in that space? There's all sorts of different partners. You got ISVs, you got SIs. What have you seen as far as pivots this year?
I think this year is the first year, honestly, that I can remember Microsoft openly saying we need the partner community. At every conference I've been at every meeting I'm in, that's one of the first things that they will tell you is they need the partner community. And of course, they've always needed the partner community. So I think that the reality is this year, we're seeing less competition and more co-opetition, if you will. Because look, let's face facts, there are going to be some places where a partner is competing with Microsoft. But for the most part, that is very much a symbiotic relationship.
But we're cooperating with several of our partners, and it's something that's working out pretty well for us, and and for our partners. So I mean, it's definitely something that we understand that. Yeah.
Well, I think it's the rising tide carries all boats. Right. I mean, if all of us are in the same mission, which is to improve the customer's ability to consume and utilize technology, then quite frankly, any of that work we do together is going to lift that customer base, lift that bar, if you will, and we're all going to benefit from it.
Yeah. So the next conference we went to, again, another 20,000 people, Microsoft Ignite. And I think that Ignite conference really speaks to the change in Microsoft. 3 years ago, there was the SharePoint conference, there was the Exchange conference, there was the Dev conference called Tech Ed.
There was Mix. There was like
tons of other
100
stuff.
of them.
And what Microsoft has done in recent years is just collapsed all of that into the mother of all Microsoft conferences from a non-partner perspective. Although there were still a lot of partners there, the focus really was on people who are doing the work, on the customers who are consuming the technology, and so we all circled up in Atlanta for a week or so of mayhem, and
Beautiful Hotlanta, Georgia.
Beautiful Hotlanta, Georgia. Our own Todd Clint baking chickens.
Baking
Anybody
chickens.
that could stump him. Yeah, it was great.
It's easy to stump Todd.
He's still
when
not
he's
on,
not
is he?
here.
He's not on.
Yeah, so
We'll talk
He'll
about
watch
it.
later and curse us.
Yeah.
that's twice we've mentioned him. So if we mention him one more time, he's gonna show up. So
He gets a free chicken.
No, it's interesting. You mentioned, kind of collapsing these different siloed off conferences, and that kind of mirrors to me the changes Microsoft corporate, because it seems like a lot of times they had business units competing against each other, business units completely siloed off from each other, so they couldn't, so they were trying to compete for resources. They were defending themselves from others, and so kind of opening this up and letting all of the conference attendees, compressing them down to one. That's a great way to do it, I think.
You get more. I think you get better results when you mix the pot a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it goes back to the whole diversity conversation. When you put, when everybody doesn't look the exact same or behave the exact same, a lot of times you can get a lot of better behavior, a lot of better outputs of it. So when you're taking and you're putting your devs next door to your collab folks, next door to your business folks, and especially when they had a bunch of CEO, CIO type meetings where they were putting even interesting industries together and seeing the collaboration that was happening in that space and how they were utilizing the different technologies. It was intended to give them more of a sort of a one-on-one with some of the presenters and the content that was there, but there was a lot of this going on because those guys spent literally the week together. There's men and women.
Yep.
Good stuff.
All right, so let's see. We have talked about some of the things that Microsoft has done really well. We've talked about some of the things they have done not so well. We've talked about how 2016 has looked. Let's go ahead and take this last little bit of time we have together and talk about what we're looking forward to in 2017.
I would call it the unicorn of an application that I'm dying to see released, and that is everyone's favorite Azure Stack. And Azure Stack is, excuse me, for those of you who don't know, it is, in a sense, a private deployment of Azure. Now, one of the reasons this has been delayed. We first heard about it a year and a half ago at the first Ignite in Chicago. And so what this is that they have taken what was almost 1,000 server deployment just to get Azure running and turn it into something that can run on a single hypervisor. So a monumental feat, mind you. Now, it's not every feature, it's not everything, but it is the same API base, it is the same code base, 95, 97%. And what it's going to allow us to be able to do is to host a private version of Azure. In other words, a single tenant version of Azure, or even we could create our own little multi-tenant one, maybe in a different geography, but running outside of the Microsoft data center and allow us to manage that for our customers to do different and unique things in. And I've been spending a lot of time lately, speaking of spreadsheets, in spreadsheets, looking at how this is actually going to impact Rackspace and what we're going to do with it. And there's some really interesting stuff on the table. We may find that is a major component of what runs a lot of our dedicated offerings at Rackspace. We may find that it's only used by some of our largest customers who can afford, because it is a hefty price tag to get into use, because there's a lot of gear that you've got to have to make this thing run and to show the value. But Azure Stack literally is you go to Azure, Stack, it's the same portal. It looks the exact same because it's the same portal. If you are a dev and you want to run your production environment in an Azure Stack, a private version of Azure, you can still do development in public Azure, and you're really just changing endpoints when it's time to go ahead and deploy that thing. Some powerful stuff.
Well, don't you think it's fair to say, too, that the whole advent of Azure Stack, really, we keep saying a private instance of Azure, you're really building your own region. You're really building an Azure region. And whether you build that for a specific customer, or you build that for yourself, or you build that for multi-tenant, you're extending the throw of Azure, which of course, is great for Microsoft because it puts Azure in places that they may not geographically be at the time.
Yes.
It puts them in places where they may not have specifically, industry specific sorts of things, or sorts of scaling, et cetera. So there's a huge advantage to thinking of it like that. You put that map up and you start to look at the Azure data center dots, and all of a sudden there's a million of them.
Yeah.
So,
well, you look at the adoption of those private cloud tools like OpenStack and VMware that are already out there, that are already being consumed to a really high degree. This makes a lot of sense, especially with its interoperability with the public Azure. So that really goes a long way towards delivering things that the big enterprises need. And as that gets fleshed out, it's going to be interesting to see how it trickles down into some of the smaller businesses and how they can get real specific value out of tuning the gear and things along those lines of deploying their own personal private Azure.
Well, and that private cloud idea, the hybrid idea, has been reinforced by AWS's partnership with VMware, et cetera. So there's validation that it's the right approach.
Because even with everything that we've seen happen from a cloud perspective over the past 5-10 years, and the adoption that's happened there, we're just getting to the big part of the wave is just now starting to happen. Everything that's already happened is still just the beginning. There's still so much data to come out of data centers, and there's so much new compute that is looking for a home that it really makes a lot of sense. Why would somebody else want to private version of it? Not everybody's ready to go and shuffle the deck of cards of data and put their stuff in a public environment that data is shared. They want a single tenant environment. They just don't want to run it anymore. Running these private clouds is not for the faint of heart. We are excellent at it, and I don't mind saying we're excellent at it because we have hundreds of people who do it every day, all day, every night, every weekend. It's what we do.
Well, it's adding up to billions of hours, over
Literally
a billion
billions
hours.
of hours. Yeah, from our OpenStack clouds that we run. And it's just, you talk about hyperscale clouds where we have infrastructure at an amazing scale. Let's say we're hyperscale cloud operators at Rackspace, where not a lot of people hold a candle to the amount of people and man hours that we've spent over the past 16, 17, 18 years managing clouds.
You talk a little bit about how there's so many I start talking and then I lose exactly what I was going to say. You talked about the fact that there's so many people who are looking at getting their cloud, their data out of their data center, but they're scared of what that means going public cloud.
Yeah.
And they're reticent to put that into the public cloud. But you look at the developer community that's really clamoring and demanding the tools that come along with a cloud approach, being able to spin up VMs quickly and having access to an infrastructure that's as flexible as a cloud is. And you see this as a great option that tension can be solved for a lot of these enterprise companies that say, I'm just not ready to go public cloud, but their internal teams are clamoring for the flexibility that comes with it. Well, there is a solution, and this is an exciting addition to that conversation.
Yeah.
Well, and that pent up demand in the developer community is mirrored in the business community, right? I mean, I can tell you, having worked in the industry side, you sit down and you say, hey, I really want to do this in development, and I really need this type of resource. And it's going to take 3 weeks for me to get a server. I'll tell you what, I'm going to go on vacation. I'll come back. It'll be ready to go. Now it is, I'll go downstairs and grab a cup of coffee and come back and the environment's ready. Right. Or I'll literally turn and put something down on the desk and it's there. So
time to market there is really accelerated, which is huge for the ability, just a developer mindset to be able to have that inspiration and then be able to go and execute on it before you lose all of the bits and pieces that started tumbling in together is huge. To be able to say, look, I was able to put together a POC. Here's the visualization of its actual value, and hand that to someone who can make a decision on it very quickly is a huge difference than your 3 weeks, I'm going to go on vacation concept of, I had some inspiration, but I'm less excited about it. I guess I'll slog through the process of building this POC maybe now that I'm back from vacation. That's a very different story, and that doesn't give you that same ability to strike while the iron's hot, and that's a huge deal.
And Drew, I'm hoping that this time I don't really throw you under the bus when I ask you if you remember something, but this is episode 173, and I'm going to go all the way back to like the first 10 episodes probably. Our old buddy Skip mentioned that he was in a meeting. He ran IT for his organization, and they said, hey, well, we're going to start this project. We're going to need an environment. And he pulled out his phone and he pulled out out the Rackspace app and he got the infrastructure built on his phone in the meeting while he was done, so that they were able to strike while the iron was hot. And that's the type of thing that, that's why we on this show have been talking about time to market. I mean, they're just in the development phase, but they didn't lose any momentum at all. They just went right into it directly from that meeting.
We talk about the time to market as being a positive thing about being able to take a great idea and make it happen very quickly. But just as important is the idea of being able to prove something out and go, wow, that's a really terrible idea. And we're not going to invest another dime in it. And we've only invested $20 in proving it out. So.
Yeah, the ability to fail quicker. And it goes back to the conversation, the question I asked sort of very leadingly around, well, do all these people who used to be, pushing buttons, patching servers lose their jobs? No, they don't lose their jobs, because now we need people who can make the decisions of, yes, this is a great idea. No, this is a horrible idea. Quicker, faster, better. So there's absolutely a place for all of these folks to take and drive their business forward, because now we don't have to spend as much time, sorting hex screws. We have robots to build servers and to do that sort of thing. We can actually get on the business of making cars better, faster, and cheaper.
But as much as so I'll say this carefully, they probably are going to lose their jobs, but they're going to get better jobs. That's the whole point, right? They're going to get better jobs.
Okay,
they're going to get better jobs.
Lose their employment.
Yeah, but they're not going to lose. That's the key. They're not going to lose their employment, because what's valuable about them, again, is business domain experience. The knowledge of what happens, with the model. I mean, where the skeletons are buried, so to speak. I mean, that's huge.
But what happens to the janitor who used to vacuum the carpet and now the Roomba does it?
I'll tell you, he's probably developing software for the company where he used to work.
If he wanted to change,
right?
If he was open to change.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's funny, just out in the hall, they're filming a commercial for a new technology high school that's going in here in San Antonio. Might not help people that are already in the workforce, but we can also mention Geekdom and a bunch of what is the Open Cloud Academy, right?
Code Up, Iron Yard. I mean, they're all
these things. They're all springing up, and so there's just so many great opportunities out there. Like you said, if you want that opportunity, it's there.
Well, we're going to have to tool those people for this environment and for what's coming next. I mean, Jess talks about the fact that we're on the sort of the tip of the wave. That's where we have to be training. That's where we have to be looking and investing in not only our high school kids, but even in our existing employees.
Well, and the tools that are out there to get that expertise are being built on top of the cloud, and are getting much better, so that you can actually get the hands-on experience. I mean, it used to be you're going to have to go and flash your computer and install Linux to go and practice. Well, now you don't have to. You can go spin up a VM in any flavor you want, in any region you want, at a very, very low cost, to get your hands dirty in these new technologies. And the tools, like you said, Code Up and Iron Yard and all of these other programs, are being built to make that easier and easier, and to democratize that information, so that on your lunch break you can go and start brushing up on .NET or whatever technology you want to add to your tool set. And I don't know, you'll see the advertisements out there all the time, like barista with a line slash through it now, developer. That's a pretty cool deal to be able to say, yeah, I can pull an awesome shot of espresso. And by the way, I built my own website, and I've got this app that I'm working on now, and show you've got a diverse set of skills you can bring to a new project.
Yeah, good friend of mine, Scott Crawford, was selling bandwidth for for call centers for their telephony stuff. Ended up leaving that company. Now he's got a startup. He went through the Code Up program here in San Antonio. Now he's coding. He's got people who work for him writing an app. Totally new world.
Yeah, it is, and it's out there. And there's so many great tutorials that are out there for people. So. Yeah,
and he's running on Azure.
Yeah,
well, and they're free resources. So let's not lose Microsoft's side of this, because I joke and I kind of slag on Ballmer for the whole developer thing. But let's be realistic. They have always been a very developer-centric and focused company, and so now you can get 30-day trial of Azure for absolutely nothing. You can download all the Visual Studio tools for absolutely nothing. You can literally go out and build yourself a business with almost zero investment in the technology to start with.
Back to that POC conversation, you can prove out this is viable or not without that outlay of cash, and with a minimal outlay of time. Standing up a device to do this was expensive and time consuming, and now it's not. And that's huge.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Well, hey, I tell you what, we are running up on the end of our hour. I'm out of coffee, which is it's a pretty bad situation here. So we're going to have to wrap it up. But thank you both for joining us. I really
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's always fun.
Absolutely. And it looks like Todd Clint is finally tuned in.
Finally decided to show up.
There we go. I told you, we mentioned his name 3 times.
Hi, Todd.
So, an hour to tick off Todd.
Exactly. So yeah, it's good. Thank you to everybody that watched live, and hopefully we've got some other folks joining us and watching in the future as well. So if you are watching this and you like it, let us know. Drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you. If you would like to tune in, we do this live every week. Unfortunately, we don't get Jeff and Kent every week, but we're going to try to remedy that a little bit next year. But next week, we've got a really great show. We've been talking about Microsoft all this week. AWS is having their big conference, reInvent, right now.
They are.
One of our business leaders from that organization within Rackspace, Jeff Cotton's going to be joining us next week.
Big
hitter.
Yeah, I've been trying to stick with the Jeff theme. So
smart. You can't go wrong.
No, you can't. Until the week after that, when Brian Kelly, our chief security officer, is joining us to talk about security. So we're going to be we're going to be wrapping up the year with some of our biggest thought leaders and business leaders. We just did Microsoft, and now we're doing AWS next week, and then security the week after that. So a lot of great information to pass along there. And then that's about it. If you want to listen to just the audio, if you are sick and tired of looking at our radio faces, you can download the podcast, Our Radio Faces and Our Radio Hairlines, and you can you can download the podcast at ohpodcast.com and get signed up for that and get this type of content every week. So on that note, we'll go ahead and get ready to wrap it up here, and I guess we will see everybody next week. Thanks, everybody.